Yeah, here, all right, I call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Village of Oxford Planning Commission, dated Tuesday, August 20th, 2019, 7 p.m. Time to call the meeting to order. I hereby call the meeting to order. Like we do always, I'd ask you all please stand with me. Flag, hand over your heart. Follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you very much. Madam Secretary, if you'd be kind enough to call the roll for this evening's meeting.
Vema? Here. Ballard?
Here.
Cook? Here. Curtis?
Here.
Douglas?
Yes.
Summit?
Yes.
Pilak? Here.
Good. Everybody's in attendance. Mo? I really appreciate you bringing sandwiches. I appreciate that.
Just make his lips just
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
That man's in
All right,
trouble.
ladies and gentlemen, we have an agenda in front of us tonight. As you recall, on the 2nd of the month, thanks to Commissioner Rose, we're going to have a marijuana discussion tonight, and that's what we have on our agenda. So we have agenda before us, dated August 20th, 2019. I'd like to have a motion to approve this agenda. I'll make a motion.
To approve the agenda as presented. Support.
All right, Madam Secretary, I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda and a second for that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Good, we have an approved agenda. Second, we have minutes in tonight's package, and this is from the meeting on July 16th, which was, I believe, the second meeting of last month. And so those minutes are before you. I hope you've had a chance to review them. I would take a motion to approve those minutes unless there are any corrections.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the July 16, 2019 Village of Oxford Planning Commission meeting.
Support.
All right, Madam Secretary, I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as subjected. Again, Madam Secretary, I thank you very much for submitting these to us in so accurate form. I appreciate it. I have a motion to approve tonight's minutes and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Good, we have approved the minutes. Madam Secretary, I did not notice any correspondence in our package. Is there anything you want to bring to my attention?
No.
All right, good. We have no correspondence for filing tonight. We are not conducting a public hearing tonight, so item 7 will be skipped over. That takes us to old business, item number 8. And under that, we have one sub-heading. A, recreational marijuana discussion. And so we're going to carry on, Mario, from where we left off last time. And again, I will leave this in your able hand if you want to give us any kind of refresher from where we were last time. Other than that, we can just launch our roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yes, tonight we have a revision to the adult use marijuana ordinance based on comments from our last meeting. And, I'm really just going to dive in and start going over them. So feel free to, point out any changes you'd like to see, or if there's other questions you have about the things you wanted in there or don't want in there. I think we've been doing this pretty well, going section by section, and mainly just starting off with definitions. Primary thing I've done is, as you requested, is include both the final facility type that's listed in the state statute, which is now number 11, the marijuana secure transporter, so we do that definition in there. And then I've also added the definitions for those type of facilities that are most relevant based on the new emergency rules that were placed by MRA, which is number 3, marijuana designated consumption establishment, number 13, temporary marijuana event. So those are the ones that are primary relevance, and includes basically everything else. Oh, and also number 6 is actually new too. That's the excess marijuana grower, in which someone is a person that holds a facility operated, a person holding 5 Class C marijuana grower licenses. So these definitions, as I mentioned before, pretty much mirror word for word what's in the state statute or in the emergency laws, except that they're kind of geared more towards the zoning aspect of it, meaning the facility. What we're regulating is the actual building or the use, whereas the state statute talks mainly about the actual person that deals with each of those individual entities.
I have a question, Mario.
Yes.
In line item 6, excess marijuana grower, you talk about Class C marijuana grower licenses. Is there anywhere in here where we are explaining what class licenses are? Or I'm assuming if there's a Class C, let me make that clear, a Class C license, are there Class A and B licenses as well?
Yes, there are.
And is that defined anywhere?
That's not defined in here, that's defined by the state statute.
All right.
And so I think it's all right to leave the Class C on its own for now. And I think that'll definitely be one of those questions that when the attorney reviews the ordinance, if he wants to dot that I, cross that T. The one benefit for that is, if in the future the state statute, the state or MRA decides to change Class C from say 500 plants to 1,000 plants, we don't necessarily have to go in to our ordinance and review it. We still have Class A, Class B, and Class C as this reference, or we would still utilize their nomenclature for whatever levels that they're determining. So, so one of the issue that that I would like the attorney's wording on is just that we talked about last time was the spelling of marijuana with a J rather than H, and I think that needs to be clarified in there. And then I think that's an attorney interpretation.
The state chose to spell it with an H. I think that's wrong myself, but not that I'm the final arbiter on that.
Right.
But
and
if the attorney thinks it should mirror the state spelling, I would relent and not be.
well, I would think it also to be get his interpretation of whether we're fine the way we are, or if we just need one statement that just in marijuana spelled with J is equivalent to marijuana spelled with.
Actually, maybe we could get the state to correct their spelling.
That'd be nice, but-
It's from old state statute. They spell it publicly the correct way, everyone does, but in formal writings, they'll still use it the public statute way. So you can use J or H, they don't care.
All right. Mario, I'm concerned. I heard what you said about the different classes. Anybody have comments about that?
Just one point, if you say it's location-based, then let them, if it's a 5,000 or 10,000 square foot space, if they can fit an A, B, or C, what have you, doesn't really matter to you folks, and the state may change those. So just call it location-based. So if you're allowing grower and industrial, no matter if it's an A, B, or C, that's more, just like a tool and die shop, you care if they have one piece of equipment or 5. Just a thought oriented that much to others, so you don't get into the weeds of the A, B, and C.
Well, our ordinance doesn't get into the weeds of the actual facility itself. We're going to rely on the industrial zoning district, or whatever zoning district is in, to govern the dimensional requirements for the facility. And so if their square footage is capable of handling, 5 Class C, then they're just an excess marijuana. And if they're less than that, then they can fit. Because we're trying to govern for us the location and where it is rather than where it's actually. We don't want to get into what the state is regulating in terms of their actual classification. But Gary, back to your point, I do think we should ask the attorney if we should just have another sentence that just references Class A, B, and C.
That's what I thought, because I look at this as a guideline for our local government to determine what's appropriate and how to conduct business, if you will. And I thought that this document should include reference to anything that's specific in that regard. So somebody comes in and wants to set up business here, set up shop in town, and the person who is administrating this would have to have all those resources available at hand to be able to make a determination as to how to proceed. And so if this document included what exactly is a Class C, somebody comes in and shows a piece of paper, I got my Class C license, what does that mean in terms of how, administratively, how do we deal with that? What does it entitle them to, et cetera, et cetera. It seems to me that this document should contain information about all of that so that Joe can make a determination as to how to proceed. Kelsey?
Kind of, related to that, so I know we have all the definitions set out here. My recommendation would be that once we get done with the entire ordinance, if we don't refer to, some say we don't, refer to an excess marijuana grower or anywhere else in here, then I'd remove it. So I'd only have definitions for things that are actually in the ordinance. So maybe it's something we can, once we get to the end, we can look back at the definition list.
Of course.
We'll obviously defer to the village attorney, he'll know too, but that's kind of what I was thinking anyways.
It's just no memory, that's all.
Yeah, no, and that's definitely, like you mentioned, something I think the attorney can help guide us on in terms of how all-encompassing the ordinance needs to be. The only reason I'm a little apprehensive about those kind of things is similarly that, number one, the ordinance should reference what we're referencing, and then number two, if the state changes theirs, whatever, we don't have to come back and change ours. It's one of those things where when there's a conflict, usually and the attorney would correct me on this if I'm wrong, but usually the state statute will supersede if there's any kind of controversy. But then again, it's one of those things where you don't necessarily have to scramble to get to change it because you think you're vulnerable, but it's one less thing you have to worry about if there's an inconsistency between the statute, and the village one. So minimizing anything in here that could be, not easily, but changed by the state, it's something that we have to react is just trying to avoid those in the future. But it's one of the things, but in the end, something's going to happen that'll eventually require an action. But I do have that noted as something that we have to clarify.
All right, that's good, carry on. Thank you very much.
Yep. So if there's any other questions on definitions, I'll move on to paragraph B, permitted and prohibited facilities. So paragraph 1 stays the same, where these are the type of facilities we'd be allowing in the village. I wanted to clarify, and actually in this case, the permitted shared facilities, because later on we do talk about the mixed use being prohibited, meaning, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the way I thought you were concerned about, that if there was a existing building that had an existing business, and then they wanted to split it in half or create a unit and then have that mixed with a separate marijuana facility to prohibit that. But I wanted to clarify that I think it's important. It's actually convenient, and it's actually the way the industry has been going to have a permitted shared facility of various types of marijuana facilities. So I mentioned last time, places usually have a grower and a processor and a provisioning center, or in this case, the retailer. So those, as long as they're all inside the same building, the state regulates, right now, they regulate specifically separate entrances, how their operation is, which once again, we're not too concerned about. But I think in and of itself, rather than require a grower in one building and then have them build a separate building for the processor and a separate building for the retailer, having all one, and once again, if the site's big enough and they can fit a building that meets their needs, then I think as long as everything is inclusive within that building, it's not anything that's going to be negative to us.
I think what we were more concerned about was somebody at a gas station, all of a sudden they're selling weed.
Right, yeah.
That's what I recall.
Or Noda has a building on Glassby that's, they're subleasing 9,000 square feet out
Right.
behind it.
Right.
You
So
don't want that, according to B2 or B3 wouldn't allow that mixed use
Right.
prohibited.
Right.
Okay.
So 3A would do that, but then new paragraph 2 is just stating that we're going to let the marijuana facilities coexist in one of their own buildings. Stacking, exactly. So as long as
Everybody agree with that? Yes.
Yeah, but it gives me an interesting question. Will they be able to operate in rented facilities?
they could, the ownership, they could rent the
I
building.
don't know. It's just something I hadn't considered before.
Okay.
The way this is listed right now, they would not be able to rent a unit inside a multi-tenant building, but they could rent a site. That's, in some places, when the landowner is savvy enough, they won't necessarily sell the property to a facility. They'll become partners. So then they will find some way, shape, or form to become a part of the ownership group. And then, it might be that Marijuana Growers of Oxford LLC rents, the space from, 120 Glassby LLC, that sort of thing. They may not specifically own the property. So, and we don't really care about the ownership because that happens all the time. Once again, it's from the use. What the effect of this prohibition would say, if there's a multi-tenant building and then NODA decides to cut out 2,000 square foot right in the middle of their building and say, all right, we're gonna rent this out to marijuana grower. We're just saying, we don't wanna have to go through that. We think it's just appropriate to have them in their own particular facility, building particular.
That brings up a lot of issues in my mind. What about a store located in a strip mall?
You're not gonna have it.
We're gonna get to the point in a minute here when we talk locations that it wouldn't, based on based just on the size of the village, unless we opened up the zoning districts, there's really not gonna be a position in which a strip mall is gonna be capable of.
There's no strip mall.
Right, yeah.
That's the only spot.
Well, our Dix is kind of a strip mall.
Well, that's one of the things
Because
that
of
we
its
have.
property facing M24.
Did we put that in here?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thought we didn't.
Yeah, I would think that if at some point in time, or even now, I guess, if you wanted to change the zoning districts in which the facilities can be located,
Yeah.
then at
That's
that
kinda what I was
point, you
thinking,
could.
Mario, is, I realize we're sticking to a very small area right now,
Right.
but say in the future, we want to expand that, I'm always trying to think of what are the repercussions of this, where can this get fouled up, and where does this go wrong?
Well, I would definitely
What's
think.
gonna trip this up?
Yeah, I would definitely think at that point, then you can change this paragraph as well. Because if the intent is to open it up to basically the other commercial zoning districts, then you would at the same time tweak everything else in here to ensure that that would be competitive. And at that point, you would get rid of that prohibition on mixed uses. And that's fine, because then when you amend the zoning ordinance, or the section, you can deal with all of those
These
individually.
3 lots, that's the fire department. And then the 2 lots north of that.
Yeah, this is very, this is probably one of the more complex aspects of this.
Well, I think our-
Because you're always gonna be shocked that somebody comes to you with a plan that you had not anticipated. And then what do? Because you look at this document and you say, damn, why didn't we think of that? And now what do? Because we didn't cover this scenario in our ordinance.
Well, one thing I think you always have to remember, just in general, about all our zoning ordinances, is that the zoning ordinance is intended to be a very dynamic document. It's not necessarily written in stone. That's why we always amend it as we go along, because new things come up, new uses come up, and you want to be able to amend them. So that's why when you're thinking about writing this ordinance now, you want to write it for as it is now, as you think is appropriate. And I'm going under the impression that you're looking at this as a way to allow for adult use marijuana facilities, to introduce them into a portion of the village, and then see how it goes. And see how, if it's going to be, pitchforks and torches, or it's going to be, they've operated for X number of years and there's no noticeable impact on the village whatsoever.
Are we okay with that?
So on the zoning, so you can have the growers and the industrial, but there's only maybe one spot on the north side. for the-
We're gonna get into the locations in a second, but yeah, basically that's what it is.
There's also a site on Lakeville Road, I believe.
Oh, one out here.
No, that's Martin Dix.
Is there industrial on Lakeville Road?
No,
Oh, for industrial.
It's twice, isn't it?
there's,
Yeah, we'll get it.
Yeah, well, sorry.
We'll get to that in a minute. All right, does anybody else have any comments on paragraph B?
no.
Just one other point to make is just that I added a new paragraph 3C, was just, if people didn't understand, I just put it in black and white, that any marijuana facility not specifically listed as permitted up in section 4.1.29B1 shall be prohibited within the village.
Okay, Mario, going back to paragraph 1 in that, didn't we talk about transporters as being a allowable business?
Dan Davis just.
We talked about putting them in the
You added it to the
definitions, right?
definitions, but last time did we talk about adding transporters to this list? Grower, microbusiness, processor, retailer, safety, compliance, and transporter?
Well, when it comes to a transporter, number one, we can't, as a village, limit to them traveling through the village.
That's correct.
But then number two, I guess where we did leave that off was the idea of, all right, if they have like a transporter's yard, like if a transportation company wants to set up their yard for their vehicles in the industrial district, like, does that necessarily need to be classified or regulated as a business if they're just a transporter that has a license to transport, A, B, C, and D, and one of the things they transport is marijuana? Because from what I know, it doesn't seem like the transporter stores the marijuana in their actual yards. They have strict regulations as to where and when they can transport the marijuana. They're only transporting it, they're not I believe they're not a holding facility.
You just have to explicitly list them if you want them. Good analogy, but if they still won't locate here, it's not a permitted use, you can spell it out most likely. But if you want them or not.
The one thing about that is that we do list it as a specific use, then they would have to follow this entire process that we'll get through.
But would they be prohibited from having, like, their headquarters in Village of Oxford if they're not on this list?
I mean,
Yes, that's my concern.
I think if
Mark, is
they're
you
just
put on there that other marijuana facilities are prohibited. If you don't list it as being one that's allowed, you're not going to allow a transporter to locate here in Oxford.
right. And I'm just thinking in terms of the use and activities of the transporter yard themselves. If they're just a building and they have a little office where there's a person on a computer directing them to go from A to B to C, and then they have garage for storing of their repair of the vehicles, and then a garage where they store the vehicle. Whether they're transporting widgets or whether they're transferring marijuana, I don't know if that's necessarily a detriment to the location of the site. I mean, if it is, we definitely can put them in there and require them to do that. But if their site was a transporter in the location now that was transporting ice, and then they said, oh, we're going to get a license, now we have a license to transport marijuana. I mean, I guess the only thing would be is if, I don't know. I don't know what you guys, I see what you're saying, that you go out.
I think you have to list it because the reason why is because you still have to go through the state to get a license to be a transporter, which then you have to follow very specific rules. I don't remember the reading, I don't remember what the guidelines were for transportation, but I know you definitely have to apply for a permit, I believe, if I remember right. And you have to still follow very specific guidelines, very specific rules, and very specific procedures, and with that you have to get a permit, and with that you have to have a location, and with that you have to have your facility be part of the ordinance. So I believe that we would have to add it in if we wanted, and so yes, we would have to add that.
Yeah, that does make sense too, the idea, because as I think about it, that they have to list with the state where their yard is.
And they have to.
So therefore, if we want to allow them.
They don't maintain any marijuana on the property.
Don't know that for sure.
Right now, it's up to 48 hours as long as they can hold it.
This could be one of the circumstances that we wait and see, and if there's a need to amend the ordinance, and begin with what is easy for us to wrap our heads around, and to begin the ordinance with this firmer language, and then look at opportunities to amend it if that becomes important. That would be one way to deal with this, because it seems a little fuzzy.
Yeah, but I definitely think it's up to you, whatever, if you want to see them in the village, we can definitely list them.
Yeah. I think you have to add, I agree with Justin, something that's regulated through the state, specifically through this law, and it's defined by the law, so.
And I want trucking companies to be able to do it, so I would agree, let's add something, make it clear.
Jack,
Yeah.
Rose, you don't want to have a trucking company in town.
This is what we want to.
Can you take their reason?
Security. They should have security around, if they're gonna have marijuana in a trucking in that area, they should have security around, make sure there's nobody.
Oh, absolutely.
Justin, do you happen to know if there's anything in the state law that requires them to provide some sort of secure facility to be able to store for up to 48 hours?
Yeah, so the state is going to regulate, one thing rest assured, just like your oil change shops or dry cleaners or whatever, which could do some kind of damaging things, these facilities all regulated, cameras in every single nook and cranny at any of the 5 license types, and regulated by them. So yes, they're going to have it, lack of a better term, there's gonna be a lot better targets for folks versus any of these facilities. And transport specifically, it's gonna be secure, locked, so forth, for it. It's more logistics play too. They're not really in the business of storing it. It's just like if you're picking up and down river, say, and then you have to go to the UP, well, you might have to stop in transit, get that package ready for the load that goes to the UP and so forth. But they're more courier, quick service to people.
Rose, I think that security will be an issue for every one of these class of licenses. Because almost every one of these types of businesses has some inventory on
But
site.
sooner or later, they're gonna get a pattern, and I just wanna make sure that that pattern is not gonna be compromised, having the trucking company around.
And they're going to kind of be like the pharmaceutical industry. So, like CVS and so forth gets locked through the mail, but then also they'll use unmarked secure vans. So it comes in nonchalant, so people don't think, oh, hey, this is a big pill van driving, delivering all these, little pills that are worth a lot of money. So kind of same concept, but it's a valid point, just like any opportunities to look for those patterns. But
Let's, Maury, go ahead and add it for now, if you will, please. And we'll just proceed gingerly with that and see where it goes. Once again, I just don't have any idea what to expect. Once these doors open, I can't even imagine what we're going to be faced with, if anything at all, but I want to be ready for it. All right, please go ahead with paragraph C.
So paragraph C is location. First, well, we can hand these out. These are some of the maps that we've done for, take one and pass it, for the different buffers. First one showing the buffer around schools, sites. And then the next two are the different buffers around the parks. And so, for our discussion last time, I'll jump down to parks first. For parks, we talked about specifically only listing Centennial and Scripter. So the maps you see, one map shows the 1,000-foot boundary around Centennial and Scripter, and the second shows a 500-foot boundary. So it gives you a good idea of how much of the adjacent property is affected by the park boundary. And then the first map, well, map C, actually shows a 1,000-foot boundary around...
Map C, is that?
Yeah, map C. That shows a 1,000-foot boundary around the school sites. And those... You might have seen it.
Okay. Unfortunately, map C, I don't believe it also encompasses the 1,000-foot academy. Is that academy over there? University?
Sure it is, because see, here's a 500, here's a 500 foot, and there's 1,000 feet, so it's twice as much.
So we're right now looking at map C.
Yes.
So map C is the boundary around Dana Oxford and OUS, but not the Oxford Virtual Academy.
Right. However, when you take a look at, even if we had since it's inclusive of the other characteristic, or the other buffer, the 500-foot buffer around Scripter, the 500-foot boundary around Scripter does eliminate the same location as the Virtual Academy.
All right, so what's your suggestion here? You're looking for what we want to do for the boundaries?
Well, when it comes to this, I wanted to answer another question that you guys had too, specifically when it came, because bumping back up to our first paragraph, child care facilities, schools and similar facilities boundaries. My initial, I was just putting numbers in there for placeholders because we can change those as is. But it had 500 feet separate from nearest of any child care center or licensed daycare facility licensed by the state of Michigan, LARA. And when it comes to that, Jack, you had the question about, what about these childcare facilities? I took a look at Lara's website. They do have a listing. You can just search by community of the various childcare facilities. And when you type in Oxford, 14 come up, but 11 of them are in the township. There's 3 located in the village, but they're at one at each school site, and then there's one at the church you mentioned on Washington. Yes. So there's one there. Based on its location in the middle of Washington, it wouldn't basically impact the other C3 location. One thing that is interesting is that there is another child care facility up on Gateway in Oxford Township. So just, the Goddard School. So the Goddard School, if there was a 1,000-foot buffer from child care facilities, it would actually touch the C3 sites zoned in the village.
C2.
Excuse me, C2, yes.
Now, what is the state going to require?
The state requires, I believe, that 1,000-foot from the schools, and we have 500 we have 1,000 from the schools and 500 from the child care facilities.
But Mario, if I'm not mistaken, it does say, the state recommends 1,000 feet, but that local villages can set that number.
Right.
So we have the discretion of being able to make that evaluate what we think is appropriate.
Yeah.
And
So-
so measure right angles to liquor control versus as the crow flies.
Right, but in ours is measured from parcel boundary to parcel boundary by radius.
Yeah, I'm saying the state though, if you look into his point too, that eats up a lot more than these radiuses too. If you look at how restrictive versus how the state would apply it to.
Right.
We're considering all of that to be such the Scripter Park?
Yeah, because it's a village-owned property. So in the end, while I think one thing to take in mind is that, we've got all these different boundaries, and basically what we were talking about is like how to make sure that there's a deleterious impact on the adjacent property. But when you factor in, parks, factor in childcare facilities, factor in the schools, their buffers pretty much cover the majority of the village, except for the one C2 site on the very north corner of the village and the industrial park. If you take a look at the maps A and B, when you look at the 500-foot buffer and then the 1,000-foot buffer, it basically just eats up into more of the industrial zone on Glassby. When you have a 500-foot buffer, that eats up the industrial site out on Lakeville Road. That site on Lakeville Road, if there was a buffer against, for parks, even a 500-foot buffer, that site's eliminated. So when you're talking about viable sites, you're talking about either how much you want on Glassby, between 500 and 1,000, and then really the child care facility buffer. 500-foot would basically permit the C2 site up on the north side of the village to be a possibility, whereas 1,000-foot would eliminate it. So it's basically the choice of, do you want to maintain, how much of the sites would you want on industrial, whether you do or do not want to allow for up on the north side of the village, the 1 or 2 parcels that could fit on Washington.
If you do the Goddard School, how far into that red does it take? Does it hit the fire hall?
No, it doesn't hit the fire hall, but it does hit the tanning shop. And that's the one viable, that's the on the site. Yeah. So if it's 500, then it would not touch that. If it's 1,000, then it would touch that.
And I guess you can't get to one without going a long ways around to get to the other. It's not like they're...
You mean between the two?
Yeah, I mean,
potential locations?
if from the guy in school, it's not like it's a straight shot to the park shot.
I think last time we had talked, one of the things I had mentioned is why don't we just consider the industrial location, and that's it? Because it covers basically, it keeps it away from the schools, it keeps it away from our parks, keeps it away from all those things, and which is all consolidated within the industrial complex. Because at the end of the day, the whole kind of point of this is to help better our community, such as from a tax-based standpoint, because really that's the only way we'll be getting revenue from this, is from increasing our tax base, from building new buildings in the industrial complex, or revitalizing those buildings or adding to those to then increase, which will then help our community. But then it's still only within that within that boundary in which, can meet that needs of the people that don't want it in the community, but then also meets the needs of the people that do want it in our community. And then that way we're not, we're still keeping it away from, 500 feet or 1,000 feet from our schools or daycares and things like that. Just kind of maybe a thought to make it a little more simplistic.
And the one benefit of this analysis right here with all these different maps is that basically the relationship between the parks and the schools versus the industrial district. So therefore, that if you did just make it more simple, that it wouldn't necessarily, you wouldn't be, letting something open that would be within 500 or 1,000 foot of the school or the various parks. The only issue would be the proximity of the south end of Scripture Park to the industrial district. And the only, if I recall, I don't think there's facilities on that very southern piece. Yeah, it's still wood.
It's still an empty lot.
Still wood. I mean, the fact is that it's owned by the village, and at some point in the future, it could be utilized for facilities. But, so I don't know if that's a concern either, without the proximity to Scripture Park.
Well, could you do both and? In other words, you could say, you could maintain the 500-foot boundary, but also say only in the industry.
That would be the way to do it.
You don't have to then have all of the other language.
So then it'd just be two issues, and actually then, for that, if you specifically say property zoned I-1 located on Glaspie Street, and then number 2 must be at least 500 feet from Scripture Park.
We can actually say located on Glaspie Street, that's
Okay.
All right. That's it, press. What about industrial drive?
Yeah, well, the little stub right
Yeah.
there.
Can we say Glaspie Street and then the little
And
stuff?
industrial. Well, no.
We got it. Because that's, little stub actually means to I think it's probably the most likely property.
Yes. No, we could reference that street as well.
Because realistically, one of the things that we talked about last time is that there's only really one thing on here, which is the retailer, in which that's where all the negative connotation comes from, is the retailer, people actually walking in and buying marijuana. The rest is actually inside a warehouse, what's inside a building, which you wouldn't know the difference if they were growing marijuana or stamping steel parts out. I mean, you would never know the difference between a facility that's doing either of those operations. Only the retailer is where you have that party store kind of, you're walking in to buy something and walking out with it, kind of negative connotation. I think that most, if you have that negative feeling about it, is what you see. But the other operations are just ones I think that would be within walls and you don't actually see happening.
And we allow the retail and industrial, so it doesn't really make a difference.
Right. And really, I think when it comes to these type of facilities, those communities that are allowing them in, for the most part, are the ones that are willing to try that whole stacking of facilities and allowing for the retail presence in industrial. And like you said, we already allow that as a portion. If it's a retail component related to the industrial, we allow that to happen. That's why the brew pubs, the brewery was able to go over on that. saying.
And I think one of the other things that I mentioned is that, we could have a limit or a number of actual facilities that we want, such as a grower. I mean, we as a group can say, hey, we want to only give 1 license, or we want to give 5 licenses. We can, or a micro business, we can give 1 license, or we can give 5 licenses, or whatever we want, or a processor, or a retailer. Maybe we only want 1 retailer within our community. I mean, we have that option to say, hey, we're only allowing 1. Just as we're saying, hey, we don't want any, what was the other couple, there was a couple that we didn't. That we
Consumption
didn't
was
include.
there.
Yes, and then that way, we're only allowing a certain amount within our industrial little facility, so that way, not every single business is then marijuana related. If that makes sense. Let's say there's, how many lots there? There's 30, let's say. Now, not all 30 lots are marijuana related, they're X amount related.
Mo, this is a pullback from what you have advocated for. Would you support what Justin is saying?
I think this is actually what I initially suggested, and it was somebody else who suggested we increase the C2.
Oh, okay.
I was really only focused on this.
Okay, because earlier...
Never thinking anyone would want it on 24. My opinion is, in 10 years, this is gonna be so natural. Every zoning ordinance is gonna change. It's gonna be, everything's gonna be different. I think to start out, this is a great place to start out. This may have, is the 500 feet. So basically from this line to here,
Right.
come up with a great way to describe that property as being allowed, and I'm in.
Would everybody support that?
Matt Bay?
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question about the buffer, the marijuana facilities buffer. Because if we restrict the only opportunities to this area and use the 500-foot facilities buffer, we only end up with 1 or 2 properties.
You would end up with about 2 to 3.
2 to 3?
2 to 3, at least viable sites. And the one thing about that, and we can consider various alternatives for the distance, but in order to make sure that the ordinance is defensible, we have to make sure that there's justification for our determination of where things can go. For example, when it comes to limiting the quantity, the other communities have limited quantities. However, sometimes other operators, if say we limited it to 3, the 4th operator, depending on the circumstances and the way they happen, they can say, well, what's your justification for 3 instead of 4?
Right.
So so generally speaking, when it comes to quantities, there has to be some kind of market analysis or some kind of foundation for that limit of quantities. Whereas if you limit you say there's a buffer requirement, that's standard practice when it comes to adult type uses in terms of a separation, because it's, as I talked about it last time, it's about creating the idea of a skid row, not a skid row, but you know what I'm saying, a concentration of them. Because if there's a concentration of the facilities, then that's when the opportunity for a deleterious impact on residents can occur. So even if you limit it, I could see you changing the setback between facilities to about 250. And you did that, you probably could get 4 in there, so.
My question is, feeding off what Justin said, the grower, the micro, those are all gonna be inside, you're gonna not know what's in those buildings. Does it really make a difference if there's 2
Right next door to you.
processors next door to each other, if we're not gonna know what they're doing? The transport companies get a 4 right in a row and never know what they're transporting. So I guess other than the retailer, I'm not really sure we have to have a firm limit on how many we have. I'm not sure what we need.
If you do a finite number or a buffer, all will still lead back to how you pick. And normally it's 3 options. First come, first serve, which may leave people literally camping out for a week or 2 to get that first spot or whatever. Because if there's a buffer, again, first come, first serve, I know I'm going to get it on number 1 and so forth. You do a lottery, which protects yourself, normally gets the worst results because everyone puts it in, they'll stack the deck, they'll put multiple apps in per location, you name it, all of the games are played, but one thing to consider. Or 3, a merit-based, again, these are only if you're gonna limit it or so forth, then a merit-based system where the scoring or some sort of parameters based on how in-depth you wanna get. Lapeer had 65 points for their merit-based for provisioning centers. You will have interest, guarantee you, no matter what area you pick it in. If it's just this industrial, you'll have more than, allotted for. I'm just picking on another stack. So you say 2, you're at least gonna have 3 applications. Yeah, then on whatever dollar amount on that.
But I don't understand why we can't say, all right, we're only allowing 2, you're the third one, sorry, you're the third
I'm
one.
saying that, but again, so how do you want to predict that? You still have to choose which way you want to get to saying.
But I'm just saying, that's one example.
For example, the communities that I know of that have come in with the quantity,
Yeah.
base it on their size and the service area they want to provide. So that's something that can be defensible, and then they can deal with the market analysis to determine what kind of facilities are required for based on X number of population. The one thing about the village itself is it's such a tiny amount of area. If you're saying that you're limiting it to the village, that's one thing, but then you're going to get a very limited quantity of facilities, and that might minimize, as you were saying, the impact the benefit that could be provided to the village in terms of tax base. So, but if you say you want to provide it for a larger region, well, someone come back and say, well, why are you limiting it to that larger region? Why can't you have someone that's transporting something from Detroit to Sault Ste. Marie or something? So I think...
Defensibility is about liability, and it's about legal exposure and trying to fight things out in court. So the less controversial way of arriving at that number may be a buffer, which is a more standard way of dealing with things.
And then I could provide more detailed, do the options for the buffer. So that way you can see the end-all quantity of what you can get. And one other thing too is, remember, by going through and limiting, by allowing for stacked licenses, then you're getting that idea of a grower, processor, retailer in one location, and then that's going to potentially have a higher dollar value versus someone that's just operating one type of store. So it's a matter of determining what kind of factors you have for that. And in the end, I think that also is going to be another question for the attorney. Whereas if you guys decide to go with a specific quantity, how they feel that's going to pan out versus if we use the buffer. So it's up to you how you want to figure that.
Go ahead, Kelsey.
So I think that anything that's arbitrary or appears to be arbitrary on our part, selecting something is going to invite a lawsuit. There's going to be so many lawsuits on this law in general. I mean, there are attorneys lining up, making business cards right now to go into this type of law to sue, because it is going to be everywhere. And so anything that we do definitely need to have, you mentioned like a market report or something like based on size. So that's why I definitely like the buffer idea better. If we want to limit it to get to that ultimate goal. I also support the industrial area only. I think that gets kind of what we all are looking for, so.
I have what might be an interesting idea. I don't, because you can't, you can't really see the lines in this map, but these are all fairly wide, like 200 feet wide lots. If you just didn't allow them to be next door to each other, you cut out half of those. And that's not arbitrary. You can't be next door to another marijuana person. Or you can't be 2 doors down, and big based on the fact that these are big lots. You're gonna have space between them. If you just say, can't be 2 doors down. You gotta be 2 doors down from those, or something like that. You cannot share
next door to each other. They have to be
That would be the
Sidwell lot lines apart.
Right, they can't share lots.
someone wanting to, split the lots, and is that going to be an issue to create?
Oh, there's always gonna be issues.
Yeah.
Well, I was about to check that, because that's the one thing I was gonna say, is that that's the issue you'll face. But if anyone does split a lot, they have to meet our minimum lot width. So I just have to see if, I'm checking, I can't recall.
I don't think there's a minimum lot.
I didn't think so either.
But you could say the lots
You'll be able to fit the buildings.
based on the map, as of 2000, what year is this? 2019. I was in 1992. I'm a little behind today. But they are big lots.
That is a good idea.
The only issue with that is then you might come into issues of a taking if you're trying to limit people from what they can and can't split with their own property. Whereas if you use the buffer, and Mo, I see what you're saying, I think we could pick a number that would have that effect that you're saying, because it is a platted subdivision, chances are people aren't gonna do it. And also the fact that there's existing buildings on every site in there except for 2
There's a
or
few.
3. There's 2 or 3 that are vacant. So I do
This
think,
corner has a lot vacant.
yeah, and then there's one on the north side, and then I thought there was one in the middle. That could be
There's
wrong.
one extra scripture.
Yes.
But what if you were to, if we find out what the lot sizes are there, and then you could use that number to,
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's
That's the way I would.
You wrote 500 here, Mario, but maybe the more appropriate number is 200.
Right. 200, 250, 225, I think, something like that. Would in effect be the idea of, in this present condition, not having them next to each other. So, but that would, in theory, and I'm not, once again, it's not foolproof, but at least the idea of saying it would have the current effect of not being right next to each other. And so that could work.
So Mo, you think these lots are approximately 200 feet?
I think they are.
I do. And then we've got land that we can grab it.
I can check on the Oakland County website.
So is a facility buffer then 200 feet, is that adequate?
Well,
It's more,
Would we want to?
If you said 201, now you pushed it over another lot.
right, but that's
Yeah,
why you
if
picked like
they're
225.
If we say you can't be within 201 feet of another, and I'm here, this lot's only 200, now this guy can't start until he's over here.
Mario, were you saying a few minutes ago that you could work up a couple of different
Right.
ways of thinking about this and bring that back as far as...
Yeah, we actually don't, and I don't know why, don't have a minimum lot width or minimum lot area in the I-1. It says specifically, in the case where rear lot, minimum lot area width shall be determined by the use setbacks and other requirements of the ordinance. So the issue with that is, once again, if we said could be adjacent, someone could create a 5-foot sliver and then, I mean, there are definitely other ways that we could try to limit that. The fact that it's not a buildable site, well, that's another fight we have to have. Whereas if we just look at the numbers, do some alternatives for the,
It's a plotted subdivision, it's a plotted.
Yeah.
You can't just split without having a buildable lot, can you?
there's
I've never seen
minimums.
that.
they don't,
Lot frontage,
Yeah.
depth and width ratios.
we don't have,
You can,
well, there's a 41 lot depth ratio for unplatted property. Not
Is it
within,
unplatted?
not within a
It's
platted,
unplatted.
it's platted. It's in a platted subdivision, so you couldn't apply those.
Simpler way sounds like it would be to look at, okay, if it was a 250, if it was 225, who would be eliminated, which ones, might work, how many would we end up with, and would that seem reasonable?
And that's the thing too about this, is like if we go to the buffers, then you're not picking and choosing particular sites,
Right.
because the market, whenever that first one comes up, that first one will set those setbacks and set that out. Whereas if we say one or the other, I mean, granted that it kind of is created on their own as well, but this way. And actually, not all the parcels are uniform in here.
No, you can see that they're not.
A lot of them are pretty close. This whole section from the park south until you get to about,
On the east side, there's a lot of,
But I think if you...
But they also vary too. Some of them are 200, some of them are 210, some have been split into 120 each. So I think I could do the GIS analysis and just do, once again, pick a scenario and then do that. But some are 240, one's 160, 135, 240, 240,
must be that south.
240, 212, 163. So it all varies, but I think we could, given the fact that they're varied, I'd feel more comfortable providing you with scenarios, and then you can see what kind of quantity you come up with and what you feel is comfortable with.
Good, all right, let's go with that then. It'll be something on the order of 200 feet, I assume.
Yeah, it'll be around.
Something like that.
Just one quick question.
I think if you do set some kind of buffer like that, what you do is you take away the ability to skip road.
Do we have similar buffer regulations for other businesses in Oxford?
It should be with your adult use,
Okay.
so for all your adult use facilities.
Okay.
I mean,
I feel more comfortable if it's something we've done to some other business.
It's a standard.
Precedent.
Yeah.
It is a standard practice
Okay.
for, like I said, for certain uses that have been deemed, deleterious, to start out with that setback.
Thank you.
Mhm. So forgive me, I'm gonna make some notes. So if I can summarize, I'll be providing maps with various setbacks between.
In essence, which map are we looking at then? for-
Map A.
Yeah,
Map A.
map A.
And this area, this is what we're looking at, this area right here.
And then revise section paragraph C.
So this guy at Thorny Hill's growing 12 plants, blowing a fatty in his backyard, because you guys can't grow there.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I'll amend paragraph C to basically limit it to
Play English there.
Yeah.
to the I-1 district with parcels fronting on Glassby, Industrial Drive, and whatever street I need to reference to make sure that those are.
with buffers, do we have to factor in the township properties south of the I-1 district? In other words, what's going on south of this along Lapeer Road? Does that have to be factored in?
Generally, I would lean on saying yes, only because, it makes it more defensible, because if you're saying that you want to but you want to minimize impacts on, say, schools, if we had the school buffer,
Right.
then just because you cross a municipal boundary,
Right.
especially since school districts cross municipal boundaries, you want to leave that as a section.
So the other side of Drainer Road there, what's over there? I mean,
American Legion, Oxford Hills, gas
The golf
station.
course.
Gas station, yeah.
Okay.
And so I was going to say right now, once again, I'm summarizing what I think you would like me to do. Paragraph C will change it to basically allow within the I-1 district with parcels fronting on Glassby, Industrial Drive, etc., those roads. And then just the second criteria is shall be setback 500 feet
No.
from Scripture Park.
Yes.
Incidental.
Well,
That's what's on-
Centennial doesn't really come into it.
No,
We're just looking at Scripter Park.
is that correct?
That sounds right.
So then that'll begin, and then we'll add the facility buffer, and then that'll be, that number we based on our analysis.
Whatever you come up with for a buffer.
And I'll provide you with, once again, different maps that shows, let's just say 100, 200, 250, and I'll see how that goes.
Kelsey?
So my question is that if we're gonna keep the buffer around Scripture Park, why not also keep the buffer around Centennial and the buffer around schools, because it doesn't impact the area that we're actually looking at having them, and that way it will make people feel better that we have a buffer around schools in both parks potentially. I know it's basically, in reality, useless, but it might help.
But the government, it's what we do.
It does
I agree with
make,
that, I think that's wise.
it does make sense too, and because
Perception.
people won't have the opportunity,
Yeah.
unless they watch this video, to see that we've gone through the analysis to make sure that they're within, that are beyond those setbacks, so, you know.
All right.
One thing, sorry to
Good with
go
that.
back, you probably want to add provisioning centers to be also marijuana retailers. That's the one that serves the patients. So in the medical program, they're called provisioning centers. So slash or listed under here, back under B1, you want to have provisioning centers as well, because they serve the patients. Or
I think we're purposely leaving medical out of this ordinance.
Okay, well, I was focused on the rec, but I thought maybe just because lots still in the retail allow that you can service both. But if you want to just focus on adult use, so be it, but.
I think we wanted to start with adult use and go from there.
Because whether a person has a card or not,
They
they
can still
can still
go,
go
yeah,
and
of
get
course.
their particular product. Where,
So you're going to leave the zones around the schools and the parks?
Yes.
Even though they're immaterial to the consideration of what we're allowed?
okay?
All right, go ahead.
And then we can get on, we can, if that sounds good to everyone?
I have a question
Yes.
about the special land use. So the permitting is going to follow with the property as opposed to be associated with the business.
Right.
That's one of my sticklers, Leslie has.
What-
We purposely now, when we have a special land use, hold it to the business owner.
Right.
Not the property, because you're right. The property guy says, well, you know, I'm old, I made my money and gone. You might not want that anymore. So to issue a special land use to the property, it's like your Burdick Street sign. You'll never get that changed. It's a non-conforming offered by a special land use, and away you go.
That's attached to the
Well,
land.
Yeah.
So regardless of who's there, it still applies.
One way we'll be dealing with that when we get to it is paragraph E9. And normalizing,
Let's do it when we get there.
so, but it is something that's true, that's very true, and so it's gonna be a tandem thing of both special land use on the land and property owner acknowledgements of that they're the operator, and if it changes, it can go away.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so in effect, we're tying it to the business. Yeah, in effect, we definitely are tying it to business. So, when it comes to the next paragraph, D, the use requirements is just about how we as a village can operate it, can request how they operate it, doesn't have any negative impact on the adjacent property owners. Just, you were saying about how, you don't necessarily know whether it's a stamping, whether they're growing marijuana. You're true if they follow our use requirements, because for stamping plan, if they're violating the noise ordinance, if keeping the doors open and they're violating the noise ordinance, they're stamping. Or similarly for marijuana production, mainly it comes to the odor, but the operators are very professional. Majority of the operators are very professional, and as long as you have requirements for odor control, these facilities are state-of-the-art type of facility that's going to be, there's not going to be any odor, you will not know. But paragraph D is intended to list those requirements and ensure that the people that, to let the applicants know, these are the kind of criteria we're going to be using to determine that they're appropriate. Paragraph D1, just right off the bat, state and licensing, local licensing and registration. Right now, the state does a two-step process of getting first pre-qualified and then having approval based on their location. So paragraph 1 would require someone, before they even apply to the village, to have pre-qualification through the state. That's just to ensure that if we go through this entire process and then they say, oh yeah, I've submitted my application, don't worry, when we get there, chances are if they're not making this investment, if they don't know they're gonna get approved. But, you know, I would point to the fact that the adult use marijuana emergency laws have relaxed the financial requirements based on, compared to medical. Medical, they still have high level of financial requirement. They relaxed it for adult use. So that might open the door, and the state wants to open the door to more operators. But this would be, paragraph 1 would require that when they submit an application, one of the things they submit is a letter from MRA that says they've received pre-qualification status. Yes, Mom?
Under part 5, the security, security requirements. What about security in the parking lot areas?
Hey, you're getting ahead.
We were just talking about the security.
No, we were talking about state local licensing and registration.
We're on numbers 1 and 2.
We're on 1.
But, yeah, we mean hop around.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were doing it all. I did think. I thought he mentioned something.
Let's cover each part.
He mentioned odor.
I did.
It's his fault.
So I put the mentioned odor.
No, we're not there.
And the reason I jumped back, because you're right, I was jumping around.
Okay, so,
The reason I jumped back is I just wanted to make sure that we're all comfortable with that the first thing is they have to go get pre-qualification first
and
before
that
they
is
come
such,
to us.
there is such a thing as pre-qualification. So the state will issue you a letter saying you are pre-qualified.
Yep.
Meaning that you've met the minimum requirements and we're in the process of evaluating whether or not we can give you a license.
Right.
Okay. All right,
That's
that's
the effect of paragraph 1. Paragraph 2 is just a statement that requires that they notify the village of their hours of operation. So mainly that's more about, it's a general courtesy most businesses would provide, but it's a requirement, we specifically listed out here because you want, especially when it comes to the police department, to just be made aware. And it's just informational, it's not anything onerous, and then it just says they have to do hours, then they have to just let the village know within 48 hours, so it's not.
Okay.
Can we restrict that to hours of operation?
If you did, if you wanted to, yes, there are communities that have restricted days of operation. Sometimes they don't want them on Sunday, sometimes they wait, they say specifically Sunday after 1 o'clock. I can get into that, and you definitely could if you wanted to.
I was just thinking like a retailer or a micro business, they don't want them shopping at 3
In the
a.m.
morning.
Well,
I was thinking the same thing, 3 a.m. Would that be addressed here, if that?
Well,
Yeah, number 2, you can.
D2 just says hours of operation. It doesn't state what those
That's
hours
correct.
are.
That's
And
correct.
right now, it's open-ended, it just says, right now, it's just supposed to
He
be
brought it up.
informational requirement, but for you guys, yeah, if you want to list it, you definitely can. Limit it to a time of day or days of the week.
And are there strong feelings here that they should, the hours of operation should be restricted to something?
I don't think they should be 24-hour.
Well, let me ask this, hours of operation for what? A dispensary or a grow operation?
Yeah.
Grow
For the growers.
operation, you're not gonna know if they're in
She
there
was
working.
talking dispensaries and.
Yeah,
Right.
just a dispensary then,
Yeah, the retail aspect.
or retail.
I'd look at it like a bar, so, I don't think we want anybody
Yeah,
there
7 to
past
2.
2 a.m., but I don't know if we want them there 2 a.m. even, do we want them there after midnight? I think, it's gonna take extra efforts of our police department, so, what do we want them looking out for? What times? I don't have any specific feelings on it other than I wouldn't want to open any more than a bar.
I think it's a good place to start, because if alcohol sales are from,
If you limited
Next
it
to 2
to anything
a.m.
less than that, if you were a retail establishment or one of those smoke shops that is listed on here that I saw, if you try to limit them to less than a bar's operation, you probably run into a challenge, I would expect.
possibly, it depends. I mean, that one is definitely more up in the air. I don't know how winnable that would be on their part, because if you're saying we're letting you operate.
What are other communities doing, Justin?
It's a whole array. Some you can open ended. A lot of times they'll put it, 8 to 10, 2 just kind of relative. They a lot of times will benchmark on what their other businesses they allow for, and we're just kind of moving for those. So, you know, if your liquor stores stay open until 2 and your other pharmacies, well then, you know, allow them to 2, but you're putting your toe in the water, you can dial it back by all means.
Should we get the police department's input on this, police chief's thoughts before we determine this, or should we go forward anyway?
I think we can make something up.
And then get his reaction to it, or their reaction.
What do you think, Justin?
Good question. Good question.
Leslie, got any ideas?
I guess I gravitate immediately to the alcohol hours because in a lot of ways we're making comparisons between marijuana adult use, or, you know, and
And would you apply this just to a retail establishment?
yes, I think that makes sense because a grower is potentially going to need to be
24-hour
active.
operations, more
Yeah.
likely to
How
have
can you say,
24-hour
you know,
operations.
Stop growing and
shut the lights off.
Tell the plants to stop.
Yeah, no watering after, you know, yeah.
Well,
But we're talking about bars. Should we be talking about party stores? Because you can't go in there and smoke a dip. You can go into a bar and have a drink. This is more, to me, it should match party store hours.
Wire, 7 o'clock until 2 o'clock.
Okay, but this is more like a party store than a bar.
Right.
Where can I go buy a beer?
And you buy it until 2.
Oh, I know exactly what you buy buyers. So, and I think that would be silly. And I just think normal retail hours, 7, 8, and 9 p.
8 to 8.
I'm gonna be to work at 8 to 8, son.
do you want to limit hours?
I do want to limit hours, and I like the idea of, and you make a good point, that you're not going to go in and smoke at the location, you're just buying it, so.
It's not a consumption event.
Even though it's in a different area than our, you know, retail spot, so I'd make it maybe a little bit later, but I don't want to randomly pick a number though, so it's kind of difficult.
Most of those businesses start between 6 and 7 o'clock. Let the people get to work in the industrial area, then the dispensary should open. They close, some of them run, not many run second shift, but they do have some, so if you had it from 8 to 9 or 8 to 8,
What do those employees want to pick it up on their way to work?
Mario, if we don't put limitations on hours of operation and we go open-ended, can we restrict it later?
Yeah, but you would have to go back
Are we
and
grandfathered in to the point where you guys never
It's just
put
a
limits on us before, and now you're, if we run into problems, we want to change the ordinance and limit hours. Is that a problem for established organizations that are already operating under unlimited hours of operation?
yeah, they would be. They could make the argument that they're pre-existing under their previous ordinance, and so it would restrict it. You know, there are other operations that you could, or excuse me, there are other ways you could verbalize it. The only way that the people will look through the loophole, for example, you say marijuana retailer should not be open 24 hours. And you might have someone open, you know, midnight to 11:59, 55 or something.
Yeah, and that's what you're saying, yeah, 23 hours and 59 minutes. You know, I'm more inclined to consider something that's a little bit more restrictive. Essentially the opposite of what I suggested. Something that's 12 hours a day. And then if somebody comes in and says, look, you know, this is really unfair.
Exactly.
You got, see, I can open it up easier than I can close it down, right?
True.
You know, so if I start, look, you guys can be open from 9 in the morning until 9 at night. That's it. For a retail establishment. And if they want to fuss about it later and say, you know, we got people banging on the door at 9:15 saying, how come we can't come in? Well, we can address that at that time. And
It's true.
open it up to 11 or whatever need be, but, you know, that's how I would approach it.
Yeah. can do that.
What about delivery? Can they deliver past 9 to midnight?
Well, it all depends.
No, I'm just
Retail.
talking about a retailer.
They're allowed to deliver out of retail at the city.
Right, but once again, the retail operation would cease
Oh, yeah,
at 9
cease,
PM
yeah.
at the time.
Right.
So that would be one of the impacts of saying 9 PM. But, yeah, but that's just what you would say. You would say, we're going to introduce it, we're going to try it from 9 AM to 9 PM, see if we're going to,
That's what
What do you think? Would you go along with that?
I
Yeah.
like that.
Leslie?
Yeah, I like
Justin?
that.
Okay with that.
Kelsey? Okay, let's try that, Maria.
Okay.
And I understand this, we're referring only to the
So-
marijuana retailer.
Mo, if it's past, 9 o'clock, you just have to have yours delivered, okay?
Just gonna steal it out.
There's gonna be a whole new,
Call my kids and borrow theirs.
I'm gonna go next door and cut a couple.
now see, here's a perfect, you've heard of Grubhub? Yeah. Now you got Grubhub.
It'd be all kinds of crazy out
You
there.
got it. Is there an app for that? Yeah.
There is.
There is.
Delivery there.
Already is, yeah.
2 minutes.
Yeah. So moving on, even though I did speak about it specifically, number 3, odor control, it's a pretty general sentence. All marijuana facilities must be equipped with an operable filtration, ventilation, and exhaust system that effectively confines odor to the interior of the building from which the odor is generated. When it comes to that, sometimes it's hard to quantify, whether it's confined or not. Some people have much more sensitive noses than others. But once again, this is just sort of a wording that we can begin with and then see if there's any kind of measurable, I don't think there's any kind of measurable way of.
Or that we would want to.
Or do you want to get into, right.
Unless there's excessive complaints or something, then the village manager would have to.
If there are, then we can say that they're violating the ordinance, because
Correct.
the ordinance says that you must be equipped that effectively confines. If I can stand on border the property and smell it, then you guys are not effectively containing it.
And those are the type of this, and the next one, the wastewater, would be the kind of things that, once an operation comes in, the learning curve as they come in and see how maybe they all work with it well, or maybe it does have to be tweaked.
Now, that was one I wanted to ask more about because, so as to minimize the amount of pesticides, fertilizers, nutrients, whatever, I mean, that seems really wiggly to me. Like, whose idea of minimal, I mean, can we be more specific here?
I think that's what the laboratory's for, and basically the compliance, you have to have it tested to make sure that it fits within the regulations, that it is safe, and that it doesn't have pesticides on it, and that it's that is a state guideline in which they have to follow.
For the marijuana, but this is the wastewater.
This is the wastewater.
So the wastewater, could be full of it because they extracted it from the plants.
Isn't it regulated through like industrial pretreatment programs that the village has, or the county, and
Well-
other state programs anyway?
What I was going to say is something to that effect of having the engineer maybe provide us with some guidance as to any kind of measurable,
I would appreciate it.
quantifying things, because, for example, I know a lot of communities that have the breweries, they didn't really expect the volume of wastewater that they're going through, and then and it's not necessarily the any kind of pesticide or negative fertilizer, it's just even just the yeast or the hops, just that amount overwhelms their stormwater, their sewer treatment systems. So I think for the wastewater, it might be similar. I can look into an engineer providing.
Justin, you're good.
So the state has to be inert, just like any other operation. You can't just pour chemicals down the drain. And so the state does require a security plan, waste disposal plan, MSD sheets of all the chemicals you're utilizing and so forth. Is anything perfect? No, by any means, but they are inspected. Again, they're supposed to have MSD sheets for everything they're using. It is tested, so hopefully they're not starting with the wrong stuff too, but I guess by any means they are coming in concentrates. An untreated employee could pour them all down the drain or something, by any means.
And then-
I guess I still would like to also see if the engineer can provide guidance, and maybe we can combine the two somehow.
And I think it could be, in the end, there, it's a more of a operational aspect. So if they have reports to submit, they can submit the reports to us. And if the reports show a violation, then that's like when we get into a moment about the special use, that could trigger something.
Okay.
Yeah. The next paragraph is security requirements, and that is a little bit longer, but it's intended basically to try to address from a local standpoint, making sure that it is secure. As mentioned, the state statute and the emergency rules have very specific requirements for security. They have various different tools when they evaluate a site. For example, their latest one I heard is they take a little tennis ball, they throw it into a room to make sure that all cameras can catch the movement of the ball throughout. And then sometimes they have sometimes tall people walking through the site and then very short people walking through the facility to make sure the angles of every camera is appropriate. But one of the things that gets into a little bit more of the details, well, number one is that we incorporate and ask that the chief of police approve the security arrangement. Just to, even though, and mainly it's more informational too, so that the chief knows, all right, this is what's going on in here and I'm familiar with it. And they have, use their experience and their resources to see if there's any kind of additional aspects they want to use. But then also when it gets into, the fact that cameras be in operation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and prior 120 hours of continuous operation stored off-site and that sort of thing. That's just so, once again, they're not just using a VCR and a 8-hour VHS tape or something like that. And it's, so that way it's more about, an adequate security system, because obviously they don't have anything that so most of the operators have never had any problems with these type of standards.
Just thinking about the recording, the importance of having that documentation for law enforcement, et cetera, et cetera. I'm asking or providing for a separate or additional backup arrangement for all recorded documents. For example, in the museum field, so online is one source of backup. It's a completely different format than the hard drive recordings. And we're required to do both in case something happens to one, and that's what I guess I'm getting at there.
I can't remember is it triple redundancy or double redundancy? I can't remember the terminology they use, but it's something to that effect.
Yeah, okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Yes, the redundancy is the issue, thank you. Does anyone else have a question or a problem with that?
That seems reasonable to me. So Mario, it says here, an adequate and approved security plan. Does the state have a program for evaluating security plans?
Yes.
So a company who came in would have to submit their security plan to the state for state approval.
Correct.
I believe the state actually has to come in and inspect.
They do. That's why I was talking about the tennis ball.
That's right.
People.
So there's a specific amount of cameras. There's a specific amount, like it says here, amount of hours that they have to have. Lighting. There's inside, outside cameras. It's all within that state. The most recent thing that we got in, what was that, July?
Yeah. Emergency room.
It outlines it. It's pretty extensive. It's really, really extensive.
So Mario, would you please add that to paragraph 5, please, that they must have an adequate and state agency approved security plan?
Yeah, I just didn't want, who's responsible?
I don't know who the responsible approver is, but, I want to make sure that, once again, Joe has all the information available at his fingertips. Is this person, when they come in for a license, they should have an approved security plan from the state.
Yep. Sounds good.
Because I think everybody here has already said that security is an issue and should well be.
Yes.
I think it hasn't been said here, but I think one of the things I've heard a lot is that until the federal government creates an avenue for finance, money,
of these operations, they're strictly cash-based. And so almost any one of these facilities would be dealing with a very substantial amount of cash. And frankly, the cash is more valuable than marijuana. You know, nobody wants to break into a marijuana facility and steal the marijuana. They want to break in and steal the money. And so if you've got a lot of cash on hand, you're asking for it, it seems to me. And so security has got to be an issue.
And the good news is there's 5 banks and credit unions already in Michigan willing and taking the industry money and so forth. And there's about 450 nationwide. So it's getting better. There's less cash. You know.
Which one's in Michigan?
So there's a bank called Live Well. There's Dart. There is, what's one in Ann Arbor? There's about 5 or 6 of them, different ones. E.W. Edwards, something along the line. There's about 5 or 6 that we know of. So yeah.
Start a bank tomorrow.
Yeah, there you go.
Lewis and Clark in Oregon has over $2 billion in deposits. They can't take any more cash because they can't place it. You know, they got too much.
That's a shame.
What a problem.
Security in the parking lot, you talked about that?
Call Bosch.
I'm at the right time now?
Call Bosch.
That might kick
Okay,
some bizarre out of the
anything else in
museum.
regards to security requirements?
Bring it
I
back.
just said, can we talk about security in the parking lots?
Sure. Oh, I see, okay. You're still on security?
Yeah.
Very good.
In the parking lots.
In the parking lot.
I've heard there's some people concerned about security in the parking lot. A couple people approached me, they just want the parking lots to be secure. So if I walk out of this place and I got my big old pound of weed with me, and that big go
over your shoulder.
let me down. Walk into my car so I don't get jumped.
First off, you're breaking the law. You're only possessed in that house.
That's right. You might get jumped by the police. The police are probably.
That's why it's in the McDonald's bag.
McDonald's.
In terms of that, Mona, are you thinking to the point of having a secured entry and exit into the parking lot? Or just monitored by their security?
I think they should
and addressed in their
definitely
security plan?
It says in there that it monitors the perimeter of the buildings.
But the
And then we
part of the
can add-
building isn't necessarily the whole parking lot. I just want to make sure the whole parking lot is as well monitored as the interior of the building, and that there's some security measures for that, taken for that side.
Yeah, I can definitely tweak it as not just the perimeter building, including parking lot and up to property lines.
Yeah.
And from what I remember from the ones I've reviewed, they do have cameras on the exterior. But
I
you're
want
right.
good cameras, not these grainy things you see on Fox 2 News. On a camera and you go, that's just it.
Well, you want the,
You're the one I'm watching for. It's always the quiet
you
ones.
want to have those City of Detroit green light cameras.
Yeah.
That are like, they require lighting and high def and all that good stuff. Yep, okay.
Show you a $135 camera.
And really, most of the others are more about, and we'll get into the others,
That's $135.
I can't even see that, Jack. He's trying to impress me.
A pair of $135 glasses.
That's the front of your, that's your front porch.
I think you must be getting tired.
Yeah, you're in.
Yeah.
Very
All right,
good.
let's keep going. All right, so are you going to include change perimeter to exterior in parking lots?
Yes.
Back there, too.
Does that make you happy, Mo?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Paragraph 6 is indoor activity only. Once again, these next ones are going to be about just putting it all out there in black and white that, all the marijuana facility activities shall be done within the building. Once again, that's more of a security issue, and just so
So
people
that
are
when
made aware.
growing, because we're
Yeah.
talking about all interior.
Right. And from what I know of the industry, it does seem like the hydroponic method is the most effective and method
Most
that they
likely
use.
to
It's not
use.
necessarily, yeah. So that's just, once again, telling them everything must be inside. no outdoor storage is allowed. 7 inspections, just specifically letting them know that, you know, they have to be in compliance with all codes and ordinances of the village and the state, and then they're subject to inspection. Prohibit activities, you know, specifically telling them in concert with the state law requires is that no smoking, inhalation, or consumption of marijuana shall take place on the premises of any marijuana facility. And once again, right now, that's based on what we allow. If at any point in the future, the village does want to allow the consumption establishments, obviously that'll have to change.
Correct.
But at this point in time,
Right.
we're envisioning that people will grow it, process it, and then customers will come, take their product, go home, and
Smoke it.
do what they want.
Roll Tide.
And then,
Remember, we're not addressing derivative CBD and all that in our ordinance at this time.
well, the way our marijuana definition is includes, because it goes with a state-specific definition, it's a level of THC content, and the fact that it is, then that is qualified as marijuana.
Okay.
From my understanding, most of the CBD oils is derived from some of the mature plants or some from the point that they don't have any THC. So right now, that's why you probably eventually see CBD oils in just in any retailer, because technically it's just a
Yeah.
product.
I saw them at Kroger the other day.
Right, so technically it's just a product that's not,
Okay.
It's expensive, but
Yeah.
it's there.
Leslie?
Yeah, I already looked at mine a little while ago.
There you go.
I closed it, but
yeah.
we might as well stay and keep working.
Yeah. Paragraph 9, revocation, suspension of special land uses. Once again, putting it out there that the village may suspend or revoke a special land use permit based on finding the marijuana facilities in violation of the provisions of the special use standards in this section, or any applicable provision of the zoning ordinance, and/or terms of the condition of special use permit and approved site plan. So basically, that's just to let them know if, you know, it can be suspended or it can be revoked. So at any point in time it occurs.
I have so many notes.
No.
So I have a note about reapplication. So if someone's license is suspended under that provision, number 9, do we need to address when and how it could?
That's a good point. You know, it doesn't really call to that. In theory, I guess I was, and from what others really don't address it, but in terms of suspension, you would think that if you're suspending them, usually you would suspend them for X number of days to remedy the situation. Like, for example, if they lose their license, but they say, well, technically we've lost our license, but you know, the state is looking at our application, they're going to give it to us in 20 days. It's just that the way they didn't work it out.
Right.
Then in theory, you could say, well, you're suspended for X number of days, come into compliance. But you're right, we probably should address that in how you like to address that. Is that process seems appropriate? If someone is suspended, they have X number of days to remedy the situation to come back into compliance?
I would suggest you would read and copy the liquor license laws, because you can take away liquor law, you could take away a Class C liquor license for a zoning ordinance violation. You can take a liquor license away for a state civil fine or an action, if you will.
Well, what about reapplying? Do you know anything about that for liquor licenses?
No.
You're suspended, it's pretty difficult to get suspended for life or whatever from the Liquor Control Commission, so no one can come back and so forth, but there's a cool-off period.
Yeah, they may suspend you for a period of time and let you back in.
So if we were going to do a period for the reapplication, do you have a suggestion or you want to look into that?
I can look into it. I think, once again, the idea of revocation or suspension. Suspension is the idea
Yeah.
generally that they can come back
Yeah.
into good standing, whereas revocation means that we're taking away the special use. And there is, in the ordinance, there is a process for revoking the special use. It does have to go to planning commission. You have to hold a public hearing, and then you can revoke your special use granted. And then in terms of reapplication, you know, that is a good point in terms of, is someone barred for life or whatever, or is it
Yeah, do I have to wait 60 days? Do I have to
60
wait 6
days.
months? You know, like how
Right.
long? Because I want to open my business again
Right.
and get running, or repair, or come into compliance.
I'll look into other examples of that, because I think important, it'd be important for this is, and in terms of defensibility, is just to treat it as any other use. That if they come to a violation of special land use, this is, we'll treat you just like any other operator, and you either get suspended or you get your special use pulled, and then whether you can apply or not.
Usually they have a brother or a sister that can go.
Or another LLC or something, yeah. But I'll take a look at that. That's a good point. Finally, paragraph 10, just once again being blatant and saying, any use or activities found by the state of Michigan or Oregon is unconstitutional or otherwise unlawful. So just telling them they can't break the law.
Okay?
So that's paragraph D. I have comments on those, so I'll get to work on those. And then paragraph E is specifically letting the applicant know what they have to provide to us before it becomes in front of the planning commission. That includes, an application form, the preliminary state license approval letter indicating they have that approval, a site plan with meeting all our normal site plan requirements for information, a use statement. They usually do this for all the medical marijuana anyway, so they put this in terms of indicating, how many facility plants they're going to be growing, and it's just another way for them to verbalize what they're going to be proposing, in addition to looking at the site plan. And it's that it's pretty informational.
So does it have to be, I'm trying to remember what the verbiage is within the new state rules, is that, does a site plan have to be, or does the site have to be 100% approved before they can submit their application to?
They have to have approval from the local municipality as part of their application for the final approval from the state, from what I understand.
Chicken or the egg?
That's
They
what
go to the state first,
Yes, they do, because they have to get a preliminary approval.
then they come here.
Then they come here.
Then, once we get a site plan approval and approve their application, they go back to the state.
Correct.
And
Yep.
look at that.
Yep.
And under adult use, everyone's gonna use the two-step. You can submit step 1 and 2 at the same time. Say if you're locally approved, if you didn't have a requirement, but almost no one's gonna do that. Maybe if you're already an operating retailer, because under state statutes, they only have 90 days to approve them.
Right.
And so you're gonna want that 2 sets of 90-day clock. Your step 1, and then even if you get it done in 45 days, then it's your step 2, so you have 90 days for that.
Same with a cell tower.
Right, okay, yeah. How they sit.
It is. If you don't approve them in 90 days, they automatically get approved.
Now they do.
Well, they got a pretty good day going now,
Yeah.
on that lawsuit.
It's crazy.
Other information, just specifically hours of operation. So obviously, now that we have a requirement, they'll just state that if they're going to maximize their hours or whether they're going to be minimal. And even though we set it up there, what they're required, this is very specific, just to say, if you have to provide the odor control plan, you have to provide your wastewater control plan, you have to provide your security plan. And then paragraph 9 is...
Before we move on.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I see some possible typos.
Sure, absolutely.
So after the number 6, the section reference, I think you mean D3, not just
Yep.
D.
Mhm.
And, wastewater D4 and security D5 instead of E and F.
Yeah, thank you.
There you go. That's your detail.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Nice.
I'm kind of proud that that's the first time. Yeah, after all those other pages, there wasn't anything else.
I want you to know, if I brought that, I want to say that too, but I was like, wait.
No.
Say no,
I'm
right?
glad someone caught something. Is that?
No, it's
I feel
really a
bad.
great, this is a great
I feel really good.
product that you
Got by.
provided us to work with, so thank you so much for that.
And we are just ripping it apart.
That's the way it works. That's the process.
E and an F.
Hey, that Leslie doesn't, then definitely the applicant.
Just somebody.
Maybe. So, to address some of your concerns, Jack and Lizzie had earlier, paragraph 9, I kind of wrapped something up into other communities trying to wrap things individually. I just wanted this, it's basically a requirement that the applicant acknowledge that they agree to what we've just stated in terms of, all right, we're granting you special use approval, you have to obey the law, you have to abide by the conditions of special use approval, and if you violate that, you can be suspended or revoked, and then for any violation. So whether if they violate their state law, if they violate any law, deemed, for unlawful activity, I should say, excuse me. Not necessarily a parking ticket. It's related to the special use. And then this is just that they provide a notarized acknowledgement that's signed by the applicant. And I want to include, because a lot of times these are LLCs, but they, I shouldn't say, by all individuals receiving pre-approval to operate a marijuana facility. That they're, acknowledging that they're aware of the land use and all the limitations. And then if at any point in time the individual is licensed by the state to operate a marijuana facility changes, the subsequent licensees shall be required to provide a revised notarized acknowledgement of operational requirements prior to conducting any activities on site. So that's a case where it is tied to the applicant. And if right now it's saying that they can transfer it. So I guess my question to you would be, is it something that you would feel the ability that they need to change it?
I think you leave it kind of as is, for the stuff to come back, but if someone should have the right to sell their business without having it, like, you can't sell the business, because then the guy who's 4th, 5th, 6th in line, if it all, fills out with other people waiting in line, someone should still have the right to sell their business, or someone earns some equity or whatever. It's still kind of like a liquor or beer and wine or whatever. They can sell their business, they still got to come in front and make sure you deem them, worthy to take the position.
If they were to sell the business, what is the state gonna do?
Well, that's the thing, at least with this, is that it would say that they would have to sign another agreement that they agree with all our operational requirements, including having a state license. So I admit I don't know exactly what the state requirement is, but I would assume you're selling the operation of the facility from one entity to another. It has to be to another licensed entity. And whether they already have their license or whether their intent is to go through the process and get the license, I guess that's up to them. I don't know if the state requires that the person already be pre-approved and licensed.
To a transfer, they make you go through the first step to kind of bring it up to speed, then approve you for a transfer. So it's kind of chicken and egg, yes, they're going to make you go through that before they transfer anyways.
So Mario, the state license is assigned to the entity, whether it be a corporation or sole operator, whatever they call it. That is a commodity that can be traded. The business could be sold. They have to reapply and go through all the process of getting right with the state.
From what I know, I do believe that if it's an entity like an LLC, there's some criteria for it's shareholder, majority operator. The actual individuals do get identified in part of that organization. So I guess that's why right now, this is definitely something that the attorney goes on, but right now I worded it as all individuals are seeking pre-approval. So for example, they might keep the same LLC, but then they might sell their majority stake to another person. So if that individual changes in theory, then I would think we'd want that person acknowledging, all right, these are your requirements when you're operating in the Village of Oxford. You agree to it. And I don't think anything we're requiring is anything onerous or anything above the state requirements, but I like this idea because it makes them aware from the get-go. Mm-hmm. We know who you are, you know who we are, we know that you're going to be operating, and then, all right, as long as you're operating within the approvals that have already been granted, welcome to the village.
And once again, this special land use permit goes to the entity and not to the property. Is that correct?
Well, this would, it runs with the land and it runs with the operator, and I guess that goes to Jack's question, like if we wanted to specifically say, if the operator changes, then do we say it automatically revokes or expires, or do we want to do that? Do we want to give them the opportunity to transfer the business to another, either individual underneath an LLC or a brand new LLC, or opportunity to sell the business? I think that's up to you guys and how you think, whether you want it to remain in perpetuity or go through again the process. And then we will have to talk about, if there's going to be, if the village administration is going to keep a running list of people that are in line, and if the buffers allow six facilities, there's number 7 waiting in the wings. Chances are, because of the free market system, they're going to also, I don't know if they'll put a lot of irons in the fire and keep it open, but they're going to be all around. So maybe it's not too onerous to once when the first one comes in, the first one says, I've made my $1 billion, I'm ready to go, retire, and buy my island somewhere, that they, does that mean the site disappears and then the next number 7 comes on the list and say, all right, where do you want to go, what do you want to do?
Well, number 1 should have the opportunity to sell this business, her business. It's a tradable commodity. It's something that has value. You have established clientele, you have a reputation, there's a lot of goodwill. It's a commodity that can be sold. And so it seems to me that we have to have some mechanism in place to be able to transfer owner A to owner B, same facility, same business, same name, nothing's changed, just somebody's taken over the helm.
And I guess I'll refer back to the liquor licenses. Architects has sold so many times. And that liquor, the new owner has to come in, we gotta get it fingerprinted, it's gotta get sent to the state. And I think as long as, if you wanna sell your business, Gary, that's fine. You sell your business Monday night. That business doesn't open Tuesday until that new owner has been fingerprinted, been sent to the state, and they've been approved. And that's why it shouldn't, you can sell it, but it doesn't get to automatically start up the next day until the new owner has been approved with the licensee.
And that's the way a liquor license is done right now. Seems reasonable.
Right. And generally speaking,
we have a precedent.
Yeah, and not only that, but I think from a zoning standpoint, the reason it runs with the land typically is because we're going through this special use process for this or any use. We have them operate in a certain way, hours of operation, location of building, all that kind of, all our criteria based on the use. So as long as that facility then that use operates the same way, whether that individual changes, I don't know if we necessarily want to have that use suddenly evaporate and disappear and then look to the next person, because that's in theory why someone is both the village and the applicant have gone through the due diligence of saying, all right, this is how you're operating, both parties agree, okay. So as long as someone continues that same detail of operation and that same criteria of licensing and all you generally, it's there, it's been operated. As long as they don't violate anything. And if the new operator decides to violate something, then we have the revocation and the suspension opportunities to deal with them. So I'm not sure if, Jack, I wasn't sure what you were thinking in terms of...
I was just wrestling with that because you're right. It's not like a sign. It's not like outdoor sales. What else do we do special land uses for? Zoning non-conformances, but this is a business, it's a liquor license, it's regulated by so many things. For us to have a special land use is almost like double protection. Do you need it?
Well, I definitely think you do need it because you want to make sure that when they come into the village, since we're going to live, the village is going to live with them and operate with them, you want to make sure that the person coming in
The special
will be like, oh yeah, security, odor, wastewater, no problem. If the next person, number 2, comes down the line and says, well, why do I got to give you an odor control? Then that's part of the application process. If there's an entity that doesn't want to deal with odor control, let's say, then the village has that opportunity to say, all right, we're going to deny you because, and you might have A, B, and C, but we need A through Z, and you're not operating in good faith because the village is, because once again, we're laying the ground for
I'm comfortable.
the playing field rules, and as long as they operate on the same playing field, okay. I would think, I mean, it's up to you guys. And this might be another one for the attorney might weigh in and see if he's,
Yeah, I think that's not a bad idea, Mario, because I think the issue of license transfer and transfer is complex. And I think it exceeds the ability of us to be able to guide you in that regard. Because I certainly don't know enough about it, but once again, I can visualize that isn't something that's going to occur. And it would be nice if we had a process in place for how that gets dealt with. Because just like a license plate can be transferred from one vehicle to another without a complete repayment of all of the fees, it already exists.
right, that's true, yeah.
So I've already paid the village my fee to start up this business. Now I've got a new owner coming in, why do I have to do all that over again?
Right.
But you should know who it is.
Right.
And I think that's what you were trying to cover.
But the new owner, if that person's gonna drive the car, has to be licensed.
Exactly, and that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so I
That's
think
what I said,
that's
They have to be
a
licensed, but they don't necessarily have to buy a brand new license plate, from us.
correct.
And then that's why they'd have to come in and transfer and sign acknowledging that, yes, we know who they are, and they acknowledge, yes, I have to get a state license, yes, I have to obey the orders,
Right.
all the special use
Yeah,
criteria.
I think that, I like the idea of, having a document that they have to file. That, as long as the attorney is comfortable with that. That's a good,
I'd like to, if possible, I'd like to know how the state plans to account for this. Because once again, if an entity is created already, and the only thing that's happening is ownership is transferring. I mean, I recognize the person has to become registered, but all the fees and everything have already been paid. It seems to me that a lesser fee would be appropriate because all you're doing is transferring license from one person to another.
I like to say the
think
government
that,
doesn't really believe in lesser fees.
I don't think the state is looking at this as an opportunity to cut the second person and give them a 50% discount, because they'll say, we still have to do all our background due diligence, we have to pay for all these staff people we hired already.
There you go.
So they're gonna want
All
their
right.
cut.
Well, like I said, I think that something that allows a process for transfer is appropriate.
Yeah. And I'll see if I can find more on how the
All
state
right,
does
I
it.
appreciate that.
And then finally, paragraphs F and G, I mean, once again, let them know that this is a special use approval. Paragraph F, marijuana for sale shall be reviewed and granted approval under requirements of site plan review and special use. They need site plan, they need special use. And then standards for marijuana use facility, it's going to be the same as any other special use approval. They're listed in 9.2.5, and compatibility with adjacent uses and that sort of thing. Just like any other special use, they have to meet our normal criteria. So that one way, someone submits all this application material, I'll write a review letter, present everything to you guys, then you go through the review letter, and one of the things, I'll go through the 7 criteria for special use, I can't remember, in addition to all these specifics for medical marijuana. So, adult use marijuana, sorry.
Okay.
So, and that is,
All right, that's a pretty good review. Now, are we nearing an end on this, do you think? Or is there more to cover?
I really think from a zoning standpoint, I think those are the things we want to cover, because it's that you know,
One more look at it and we'll be ready to go up.
one more look at it, and it'd probably just be some tweaks at that point. Because as I mentioned, I'll be providing you with adding secure transporter as a permitted facility use of facility, the maps with varying the setbacks between the parcels, and changes to specify that they're allowed in the I-1 district fronting on Glassby Industrial Drive, etc. Setback 500 feet from Scripter. And we all will be keeping the setbacks from the schools and the parks. Specify the hours of operation from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Consult with the engineer about anything about can quantify the wastewater requirement. Security, make sure we have some method of including redundancies for the recording of the videos. And in addition to security in the parking lot. Then trying to answer the questions of, suspension, how can they be reestablished, kind of looking at how the other uses deal with suspensions and how we can treat them the same. Look at the liquor control law actually as a way of dealing with suspensions. Then also, if revoked, trying to kind of determine if they can actually be reapply the actual the person. And then the last thing, operating the operational requirement acknowledgement in the basically transfer of the business. I do think it's an attorney issue, but I'll see how the state deals with attorney issues.
Appreciate that.
So yeah, the next one will probably be something with all those changes, a little bit more of a session. But then beyond that, at that point, it might be about actually after one more meeting of these review details, and then at that point, we can have a discussion of what you think about setting a public hearing, whether we want to do it at that meeting or have one more look at it, finalized, and then setting a public hearing.
Can we get, when you give this to us, a copy of the site regulations in the I-1 district along
Yes.
with it? Just to get everything together.
Now, do we want to consider adding this as an agenda item for our next meeting, or do you want to wait until the 2nd of next month?
I wouldn't mind until the 2nd of next
Okay.
month, just because in terms of doing the maps and everything.
Okay, yeah, because it looks to me like you have.
Yeah, but then after that, maybe we can get back to going every
Okay,
meeting.
all right. So Terry, if you kindly take care of that for us, please. And then if we have any business to conduct on the first meeting of next month, we'll convene, but if not, we'll just wait until the second meeting of next month. And hopefully we'll be ready with something to go then.
What do you want to eat?
The subs were really good. We hit it out of
Where
the
are those
park. That Subway. Yeah, they'll do a platter for you like that. Thank you very much for doing that, Mo. I appreciate it. I sure
We'll get something good in a while.
do. Okay.
Something great.
The sushi. All right, then. All right, anything else under recreational marijuana discussion under old business? All right, we'll take that as a no. We don't have any public here, so Justin, thank you very much for coming. We appreciate all your comments tonight.
Thank you.
Consultant and administrative comments. Mario, do you have anything for us?
Nope, nothing else at this time.
Okay, Terry, do you have anything for us? Thank you very much for your help, Terry. I sure appreciate it. You do a good job of keeping us organized. I'm grateful for it. Commissioner comments. Jack, do you have a township update?
Yeah, we just have a preliminary site plan this Thursday night for Culvers. And then they're going to have a special land use and final site plan 2 weeks later.
Great.
Dr. Zimmer's, is it?
No.
Yeah.
Right.
Right up next to Tractor Supply. I think I'm welcome to have that. That's a good one. One of my favorites.
Yeah, we go all the way down past Lake Lord.
All right, good. Thank you, Jack. Rose, do you have anything?
Can I ask Jake a question?
Yes, you may.
Anything on the hospital?
September 1st.
Is,
That's the date that the need will be approved or not.
okay.
By the way, Ascension Hospital, who bought the 14 acres by McDonald's.
What about the Dominican property on Drainer?
Oh, that's not the need area. The need area is north of Drainer, south of Ray.
So they're on the wrong side of Drainer.
Yeah. Huh, interesting.
Because the levy property north on the corner is not viable, and that's 50 acres of nice flat land.
What's the need acres? It's called need acres?
Where the state identified the area need.
Area, a certificate of need is an area.
Oh, gotcha.
That needs a hospital with so many beds.
That is so funny that they're right there on the corner. They
Yeah.
can't be considered.
No?
Location, location, location.
Oh, yeah, we just met with Steve Weiner last week, too. That's it.
Thanks
All
for
right,
the info.
thank you very much. All right, Pete's not here, so unless anybody else can speak to DDA, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved at 8:50. Yeah, what's the clock? 59.
All right, Madam Secretary, I have a motion to adjourn and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Good, thank you, everyone. Appreciate all of your help and your input.